Okay, we need to talk about Daenerys and Viserys Targaryen for a second and what could have been. We have brand new A Song of Ice and Fire artwork by the brilliant Jota Saraiva. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Jota. They are one of the premier A Song of Ice and Fire artists. They always nail it. Their artwork is like it tells the story and gives us a visual of people we've never met. We've only read about them in a book. And the other day, they posted this brand new artwork titled House Targaryen's Exile, Queen Rhaella and Prince Viserys' Last Days at Dragonstone. We need to talk about it. During Robert's rebellion, they are forced to flee to Dragonstone, the ancestral seat of House Targaryen, the place where it all began for that dynasty. And in the background is this incredible artwork tapestry of 3 Targaryen dragons, Vhagar, Balerion, Meraxes, and Visenya, Aegon, and Rhaenys Targaryen, the original conquering trio. That's where it all began. And Rhaella, she is a direct descendant from this part of the family. Her it's like 9, 10 times great-grandparents are Aegon and Rhaenys. It goes down through Aenys and Jaehaerys and so on and so forth, all the way down to Rhaella and her brother, who she then married, Aerys II, the Mad King. This is just such a thoughtful touch, having their ancestors right there, watching over this scene, watching the fall of House Targaryen 300 years after the conquest. Queen Rhaella is pregnant with Daenerys, and Viserys, at this time, he's a kid. He's like 5, 6 years old when his house falls. His big brother Rhaegar dies on the Trident, and then his father, the Mad King, killed by Jaime Lannister. This artwork, it's provoking an emotional response from me because this is what could have been. This is Viserys as the sweet kid he once was. Aerys kept Viserys and Rhaella apart a lot of the time. He wouldn't allow her to be alone with her son. Aerys at the time, he was losing his mind and he was overcome with paranoia, and that extended to Rhaella. And this is the person who he's known all his life. Like, that's his sister that he's married. He should be able to trust her. But he doesn't. And Rhaella is on the receiving end of some of the worst and most egregious things that the Mad King does. And Viserys, he had to be aware of this. He had to notice and see these things. He would have picked up on this. And the thing about Rhaella Targaryen that's so interesting and so tragic is her life was never really hers. It was all set out before her. This is what's going to happen because a woods witch had told Jaehaerys II, her father, your children, Aerys and Rhaella, the prince who was promised will come from their union. So Aerys and Rhaella, it was expected that they would marry, and they did. But it was not a happy marriage by any stretch of the imagination. Rhaella and Viserys go to Dragonstone when things start getting pretty sketchy during Robert's rebellion. Interestingly, Aerys does not extend this safeguarding privilege to his daughter-in-law Elia Martell and his 2 grandchildren, Rhaenys and Aegon, who he keeps hostage in King's Landing. But I can only imagine how terrified Rhaella must have been to hear the news that her son Rhaegar was dead. He'd fallen in battle. And then her husband, he's gone, killed by the Kingslayer. And she's pregnant and she's got this young boy to look after. She must have been absolutely petrified. Like, what do we do? How do we survive this? Not only is she mourning the loss of her son and her husband, but she's about to give birth. I can't imagine what Rhaella went through. She must have had the weight of the world on her shoulders. And that had to have an effect on Viserys. It had to be hard to see your mother this stressed out, to be going through all of this. The Viserys that we know when we join the story, he's not a nice guy. He's mean. He's nasty. He's angry. He's out for vengeance. He is the polar opposite of this little boy cradling his mother and her bump. Everything changed for Viserys when Rhaella died giving birth to Dany. Had Rhaella survived, it's such a big what if, because things would have been so different and Daenerys and Viserys would have grown up into different people had they had their mother there. Rhaella crowned Viserys. She said, "My boy, You are now the king. But then she dies, and all of a sudden it's Viserys who has the weight of the world on his shoulders. He's alone with a baby sister. He has nobody he can really trust, aside from a few loyalists. So Willem Darry, he is one of them. He hears that Stannis Baratheon is coming. He's going to besiege Dragonstone. They've got to get out now. And they do. They flee to Essos, which is where Viserys and Daenerys grow up. But in exile, constantly running, no family. That is when everything changes for Viserys. This darkness starts creeping in. This little boy, he is lost. And Viserys makes a choice. He is mean. He is nasty to Dany. And it's that cycle repeating itself, that generational trauma. Aerys took it out on Rhaella. Viserys is taking it out on Daenerys. And that is sad because it didn't need to be that way. But Viserys had the weight of the world on his shoulders and he cracked. It was too much and he became consumed, and it didn't help that people whispered in his ear like, oh, you are so hard done by, go back and take the Iron Throne, it was stolen from you. He has all of these voices in his head and he just cracks, and he's not a nice guy. And Daenerys is on the receiving end of the majority of it. Daenerys mirrors her mother Rhaella all the way up through her childhood, up to and including her marriage to Khal Drogo, because just like her mother, Daenerys didn't have a choice. It was all arranged. Rhaella was very young when she gave birth to Rhaegar. Daenerys was very young when she was pregnant with Rhaegar. It's history repeating itself. And I think we have to remember the image of this young boy, of what could have been, this young kid, a sweet kid. And then you see who he turned into, and you've got to fill in the gaps of how did this change happen? And I think the straw that broke the camel's back was when Viserys was forced to sell his mother's crown. They needed the money. They had to survive. He was forced to do it. I don't think he was happy about it at all. And doing that, selling his mother's crown, he did what he had to do so he and Dany would survive. But also it was like a symbolic parting, like handing over the last connection to your mother. I think after that, all of the hope and all of the potential, the goodness started seeping out of Viserys quickly, and it was replaced with anger, with vitriol, with rage. And he takes it out on Dany. And all of this has a huge impact on who these two kids grow up to be. Oh, I just love talking about the history and the relationships between these different characters. The way the cycle keeps on repeating. People go through things and it didn't need to be that way. And Viserys and Daenerys and Rhaella, they are a perfect example of this. And this artwork, it is beautiful, it is stunning, and it is perfectly representative of what could have been.